Sure. Thank you, Tiahni. And hello, everyone. My name is Kylie Burn, and I'm calling from Garamilla here in Darwin on Larrakia country. And I pay my respects to the Larrakia people, many of whom are my family members as well, and acknowledge their ongoing connection to country. And I honour their elders, past and present, and thank them for their continuation and sharing their knowledge and culture, especially this week during NAIDOC week, acknowledging the Larrakia Nation really steps up every year and supports the whole community to celebrate. Um, I'm an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander woman here that lives on Larrakia country. My connections are through my mother to the Lingaman people that are not too far here from Darwin, but also through my grandfather to the Torres Strait. And I work at Bush Heritage as an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships Program Manager here in the Northern Territory, as well as the Cape in Queensland. And I'm really happy to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Deadly. Thank you, Sis Kylie. Esso, thank you. And Ross, over to you. Where are you joining us from today? And tell us about yourself.
Hey, good morning, all. Welcome to 50 years of Deadly through the NAIDOC week. This week's going to be pretty adventurous for all the mobs throughout the country. Yeah, I come from a small community of Southwest Queensland, Charleville, was brought up. I'm a Kuma custodian for this area. I get around this way, and I live in Goongarrie country, that's my wife's country, and that's where I reside at currently. Yeah, I'm the Aboriginal Partnership Manager of the North Region of Queensland. We cover around about 13 or 14 reserves from the top of Cape York down to the bottom of the Warrego Paru priority landscaped area. So it's a big area, and been working with Bush Heritage now for 3 years and enjoying it. Yeah, thanks, guys.
Deadly. Thanks, Ross. And I'm the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Engagement Manager at Bush Heritage. So my role is supporting and working alongside our wonderful team, such as Kylie and Ross, and bringing together the national program of what we do at Bush Heritage. So we have an incredible team of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across the nation that support on-country works that tie in with the rest of our conservation team and ecologists and support staff at Bush Heritage. I'm a Karareg woman on my father's side and have connections to APY, Ananu, Piranjara, Yankunytjatjara country through my mum's side as well. So this is part of our wonderful team. We have more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander staff across the Bush Heritage workforce, but this is our team that works specifically with partnerships. So we've got Kylie up the top and Ross up the top as well. They're representing the top northern part of Australia. I'm calling in from Tandanya or Adelaide, as I mentioned earlier, representing part of the south. We've got Vicky Parsley and Bam Lees on the east coast, working with the partnerships across there. Bruce Hammond, who's our senior advisor, also based in South Australia, and then Cherie Strauss in WA. So a wonderful team of great people that we get to work alongside and support traditional custodian groups across the country. At Bush Heritage, our vision is healthy country protected forever, and that vision is simply not possible without acknowledging and honouring Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and people and leadership at its heart. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have cared for this country for 65,000 years. We're the first ecologists and the first scientists and have been caring for country and waterways as part of our law and part of our cultural and social obligations since time immemorial. The knowledge and cultural authority that we have as First Nations people always needs to lead the way in conservation, especially in the modern Australian Western conservation context. So partnerships at Bush Heritage aren't just an add-on to our conservation work. They are conservation work by their core. When we work alongside traditional owners through genuine, respectful, long-term partnerships, we deliver better outcomes for country, for culture, for health of people, and for our communities. Our approach is grounded in right way science, which is what we term as bringing in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge, and Indigenous science alongside Western science, so that together with these different knowledge systems combining, that we have the right approach of how to do business in the right way. So when we talk about right way science, we have that underpinned by a variety of different big concepts such as Indigenous cultural intellectual property, making sure that knowledges are safeguarded by the traditional custodians of whose knowledge it is, and that we respect that in the right way, and is also underpinned by things like free, prior and informed consent, which is part of our rights as Aboriginal people to access and acknowledge that we are the owners and leaders of country, no matter where the land title sits in now. Under Bush Heritage's 2030 strategy, we're committed to deepening and doubling our impact, and First Nations leadership sits at the centre of both of these strategies. Internally, we've been uplifting our cultural competency framework and knowledge strategy so that every person at Bush Heritage, from the field to the boardroom to the offices, can work in culturally safe two-way knowledge systems and understand and respect our cultures and people. Our leadership matters as much as our partnerships, and we're growing our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander representation across our workforce, our leadership and executive teams or senior leadership teams, so that First Nations voices aren't just consulted, they're actually deciding and underpinning the values that we like to support within our communities. So we're here for NAIDOC Week, and NAIDOC Week has always been a national celebration of the histories, cultures and achievements of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, the oldest continuing culture on Earth, which is something that I am always proud of and always boggles my mind when you think that each Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person in Australia has 2,500 generations of grandparents behind them. It's pretty incredible, the strength and resilience and determination of a culture like ours. NAIDOC Week runs from the 5th to the 12th of July, and it stands for National Aborigines and Islanders Day of Observance Committee, and its origins go back to the activists of the early 1920s and 30s and the Day of Mourning that we celebrated in 1939, which was actually one of the earliest civil rights demonstrations in the world. From a day of protest grew a day of observance, and from one day, observing the Day of Mourning, grew to a week. The committee became a fully Aboriginal-led committee in 1974, 2 years after my mum was born. The observance came a full week in 1975, and in 1991 the name changed to formally recognise Torres Strait Islander peoples as First Peoples, which is something that means a lot to me and probably Kylie as well, being a Karaeg woman from Zendakez or the Torres Strait. So 2026 NAIDOC is incredibly special because it marks 50 years of Deadly. For Mob, Deadly means, excellent, incredible, really awesome, cool, spiffy, trendy, however you want. I'm trying to think of different generations of Deadly. Something really brilliant and something to be super proud of, something that you can get excited by, that you can support someone and say, yeah, that's really Deadly. You did an awesome job there. The theme is both a reflection and a declaration, honouring 5 decades of our elders, organisations, artists, activists and communities who refuse to be silenced, and how we can look to the next 50 years of how we lead and nurture our young people growing up strong and proud in culture. This year's official poster, which is on the right hand of your screen there, is Paralpi and was created by Zachariah Fielding, who is an incredible Yunkanjarra man from APY right here in South Australia. And you might have listened to Electric Fields, that's Zachariah as well, with their partner, creating incredible music to celebrate across the nation. Zachariah describes his artwork as being about movement through generations, through memory, through song and story. NAIDOC Week is for everyone, and although we feel like it's all of our birthday as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to celebrate NAIDOC Week, it's an invitation for all Australians to listen, learn, celebrate alongside us and reflect how we can support First Nations leadership and self-determination all year round. We're also aware that across times like NAIDOC Week that there is often a rise in racism, and it's also an opportunity for all Australians to call out that racism and to support Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and lead in the space, not forcing more cultural or colonial load on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, but really being good allies and picking up that load too. So for me, NAIDOC has always been about pride and belonging. I was born in Adelaide and spent the first 3 years of my growing up on Palm Island, which is one of the largest remote Aboriginal communities in Australia. And growing up on Palm, NAIDOC was a time where we would dance, share food like cup murray, which is a big ceremonial food cooked underground. We'd celebrate and have everybody out on the street dancing and having a good time. It was the week where being a black fella wasn't something to explain, it was something to celebrate loudly together. 50 years of Deadly makes me think about the generations who made it possible for me to stand where I stand. And I'm standing on 50 years of Deadly right now. It makes me think about responsibility. And this picture of an upside down flag is something that I drew when I was 5 years old. And it says, "I'm proud of my culture," with an O for culture, which I think is really cute. So I sent this across to wonderful Megan to share with you all. I thought it was a really great example of, growing up on Palm and going to an old mission school on an island. And the way that I had the privilege of growing up. So this is where I get my Deadly dance moves from. I was taught to island dance when I was about 5 years old. So if you see me shaking around on the dance floor, this is where I get it from, learning from elders since I was a really young person. Here's another picture of some NAIDOC celebrations back in the day with my sis Tanika. I've just lost my first tooth. The picture on the left is me it's hard to see, but I'm grinning and riding my bike back home, really excited to go eat some passion fruit after NAIDOC, and friends and family celebrating around there as well. This was NAIDOC Week a couple of years ago, which was around the time of the Voice to Parliament, celebrating Voice, Treaty and Truth and going for that referendum. This was a community event that myself and Jakira Telfer ran to talk about our rights as First Nations people and, the future of where we having constitutional recognition would have been really valuable for our communities and having a voice. But obviously the referendum was a no, and we just keep striving to do other work to have our voice heard and have a seat at the table. Other ways that I celebrate personally across NAIDOC Week is being out on country. So these are some pictures coming up of fire, sharing food. We'll just keep flicking through these ones kind of quickly. This is a Palawa Pakana friend of mine who made me a beautiful shell necklace. This is of Palawa Pakana tradition. I'm wearing it today, of that islander connection to culture, which transcends from Lutruwita, Tasmania, all the way up to my island, Wyburn, or Thursday Island in the Torres Strait. This was the start of a burning for an opening with some Ghana community down on the country that I live on. This is some conservation work. I'm holding a 30-30 up with my dad, getting rid of some pigs off country. Pigs are really bad for the environment. And there's my dad there, driving our ATV on the lookout for pigs. This is some Gunga or Pandanus. I'm doing some work across NAIDOC up in East Arnhem a couple of years ago. I'm dyeing this Pandanus or Gunga with different plant dyes, such as Gulachi Gulachi, which is like a bulb that sits in the ground. Doing some painting on NAIDOC, celebrating our art. Out camping, out bush. I've got lots of blisters on my feet from wearing the wrong shoes. So this week makes me think a lot about responsibility, and this milestone is a handover of the fire, celebrating that the next 50 years of Deadly belongs to our young people, and also honouring all of the people that come before us who have carried that torch too, let alone the 65,000 years before the 50 years of NAIDOC that we celebrate. So we talk a lot about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander partnerships at Bush Heritage and about collaborating for conservation. But what does that actually mean in practice, on the ground, on country, beyond the media highlights that you get shown? We're going to have a yarn about some of the work that we undertake and share some real examples. So Kylie and Ross, what does a successful partnership look like at Bush Heritage? And maybe after you answer this, we can bring up those photos, Kylie, of you at NAIDOC Week as well, and Ross, of your son's artwork.
Yeah, sure. So a successful Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander partnership, what does it look like at Bush Heritage? I would say that, first and foremost, working together in the right way. And that's really around like what our right way approach is, like meaning, working together in the right way, working cross-culturally, across knowledge systems, and having really good communication is really important, as well as, prioritizing safety, not just out bush, but also cultural safety, and making sure we're working together, prioritizing that, for ourselves and for our partners. And we're solving problems together. We're all at the same table, and looking at the right ways to work both ways in that really genuine cross-cultural way. And that can look really different for each partnership, and it's making sure that you're able to adapt to those needs from both sides, and being able to share our experiences and knowledge with each other, and our different ways of working is also really important, because in terms of partnerships, we bring different strengths to that, in terms of our shared goals, which is looking after country, and seeing country healthy and protected. So finding those ways to support each other, but also finding ways to work together respectfully, and having the concept of looking at those partnerships in a long-term lens. So thinking about that relationship will go on and it will continue for a long time. How do we make sure that we show up to that partnership in the right way, and reach our shared goals together? Yeah.
Deadly. Thanks, Kylie. I'll throw to Ross, and then I'm going to come back to reflect on what NAIDOC Week means to you, and we'll go through the pictures.
Yeah, good morning all. Yeah, let's I'll probably cover the last bit in this one also, Tiahni. As we celebrate the 50 years of Deadly, I think about those that's walked before us, and those that walked with us today, and those will walk after us. So it's our responsibility to ensure that the next generations inherit the country that is healthier than we found it, and hopefully the culture is a lot stronger than ever. So, that's the 50 years of Deadly. It means to me, it's honouring our elders, our trailblazers, our ancestors, celebrating the people, and embracing the partnerships we build with respect, and ensuring that as traditional custodians of bush heritage, continue to walking together and sharing the two-way signs and caring for country and protecting forever. So that's what's the start of a really great journey. And when we hear about NAIDOC themes, 50 years of Deadly, I just don't think about the history books. I think about my own life and my own journey. 50 years ago, I was a young Pima boy, growing up on country, and my learnings wasn't in the building. It was on the rivers and the creeks, and with the trees and the animals and the tracks and the old people, and the stories passed down to me. I learned that from country, and something that we own. Country is something that we belong to. So it's very. It's every water hole, every tree. So it's the animals, every place that has meanings, responsibility, and connection. As a young fellow, you learn about watching and listening, and having that respect for the elders, the respect for family, and the respect for culture, and the respect for country. These lessons, they'll stay with me forever, all my life. And as my totem, the red kangaroo, the red kangaroo represents the strength, the resilience, the endurance, and the leadership. It reminds me of to keep moving forward and remain connected to country, and to carry the responsibility of protecting the culture and passing the knowledge on to our future generations. Over the last 50 years, we've seen enormous changes. I've seen Aboriginal people move from having no voice, ignored, and becoming the leaders in conservation and country and research and land management. So, while much of that might change, its connection to country will never change. It's always that connection to country that brings us back. It gives us, the healing. It gives us a lot, and we really, really got to respect that moving forward. And for bush heritage, to understand that the best outcomes for country comes when traditional custodians and conservation, that we walk together in mutual respect, and caring for country and sharing the two-way science, bringing together thousands of years of Aboriginal cultural knowledge and the contemporary conservational science. So it's together, we got to walk together to make things a lot stronger and make sure the decisions for country are better. So yeah, that's a bit of in a nutshell of what I think the 50 years of Dudley means to mob and how we walk together. You see in this painting here that the sun done, it's two people there who's got the fish nets and there's fresh water. Murray's out this way, you've got the fish and the turtles and tucker, so it's bush tucker, and you've got the freshwater people there that's got the looking for food. So yeah, it's a nice little depiction of his in-laws and how they work together on country too in the fishing. So I'll pass it back to you, Tiahni.
Deadly. Thanks, Bella Ross. I always feel really lucky to work alongside Ross. He honors his totem well. He never goes backwards, just like a kangaroo. He keeps hopping forwards and finding new solutions. And on top of his role at Bush Heritage, Ross has incredible influence and leadership across his community in a variety of different ways. He makes bush foods, makes different tools. You're an absolute legend, and I feel really lucky that you're with us at Bush. Like I said, it'd be great if we could keep you forever and clone you, Ross, from the knowledge and wisdom that you hold. So I feel really lucky to always yarn with you and to share your wisdom with others. So thanks so much. Sis Kylie, what does 50 years of Deadly mean to you?
I would say it's, for me, NAIDOC has always been a really rich time of celebration and connection with family and with the wider community. This photo here is from probably a couple of years ago from NAIDOC now with my auntie and my cousin. It's always just really great to be able to, get out and do things that celebrate community pride. And celebrating the diversity of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures as well, across our community, but across Australia more broadly as well. Culture is so diverse and complex, and so strong in its own ways. So having NAIDOC is a really great time to be able to reflect on all of our diversity and richness that we have across our cultures and how we come together, and how we stand together to have a really strong voice. And for me, with the theme of 50 years of Deadly, the theme is a really great time to think about the history that has come before us, and makes me think a lot about when I was a kid at NAIDOC celebrations, and running amok with my cousins and all of my friends and having family around all the time, and all of those really, good memories of those times, going to events and, being together with family and thinking about now, seeing the younger people. I mean, I'm still a young person, I suppose, but people younger than me, my younger cousins and my nephews, seeing them also enjoy those events and being together is really great to see. And, before I was at Bush Heritage, I also worked for the Northern Land Council. And a lot of time, during those years working there, I would volunteer a lot, doing the march and different community events. And it's just such a great way to get involved and being part of that community togetherness and feeling that pride that everyone had to be there. It's really great to get involved with those events that are happening in your community, Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. Showing up, showing your support. It's it really does make a difference, and it makes people feel more welcome, and really enjoy that time and that celebration together.
Thanks, Kylie. Absolutely. So important to be showing good allyship and also celebrating culture. I feel like when you're in the space of caring for country and caring for social justice issues and fighting for the rights of your people all the time, it's hard to remember to actually stop and celebrate with joy and enjoy all of the things that make our culture so strong: language, food, delicious food, dancing, story, song, all of those things. So a really good reminder to actually let your hair down and enjoy the week as well. We've got a variety of questions to yarn about here, and I guess it's that I always think about when we have yarning circles for everybody, how we bring these two worlds together. And sometimes I find it difficult to articulate when someone asks me a question about culture or caring for country, to translate it into that other world of caring for country and a non-hierarchical thinking brain where we are as equal as the plants and the animals and the water. So some of these questions might be worded in an interesting way when you're in that two-world space, but I think we've got a lot of education and storytelling to do to get all Australians on the same page to really understand our cultural way and the way that we think. So we're going to have a good crack at it today. So the next question I have is, why is it important that traditional custodians have access to country? And I think you can see straight away from that two-way lens how that question comes up. Like, it seems so obvious for First Nations people why that's important, but can you please explain to everybody the value of that? I'll start with you, Kylie.
Yeah, I guess it is a very loaded question, and can be I like questions like that. It's like you say, Tiahni, can be hard to really explain in a way, because it's I guess, for us, things that we live and breathe every day. Um, but in terms of, why that is important, it is of the utmost important because, preserving and maintaining cultural identity and knowledge and language, um, it's it creates, those benefits over human well-being, but caring for um, country and having people on country, it's also strengthening not just the connections of people and culture to that country, and that is underpinning identity, but it's also really important for the health of that country and how country will be monitored, how people as humans, have the ability to respond to changes on country that we're observing, as well as what we're going to do about it, and how can we work together to make sure that we're looking after country. Having the traditional custodians on their country and access to their country is utmost important to that, and to that continuation, of the preservation and maintenance of those places that has happened for tens of thousands of years. Yeah.
Thanks, sis. 100%. Ross, you're really passionate about getting mob back on to country. It's something that you do a really deadly job of as well. Can you explain a bit more, adding to Kylie?
When you look at country, it's been dispossessed, I guess, and taken from there, and returning and getting mob back to country is so powerful because it's reconnecting with songlines, storylines, their totems, their bush medicines, their food. So it's a really, really empowering way of looking at it when they return to country. And a lot of people have been off country for over 100 years. So it's really to make that reconnection and sitting down and reconnecting with their stories that the old people have handed down. And when you get back on country, you can really relate to it and feel the empowerment. And when you get people returning to country, you can, they feel down a bit. But as soon as they enter their country, you can see this difference in them. They got the extra step in their, in their leaving. They're happier. They're more inclined to open up and express, and it's really healing. So it's a really, really long journey for them. And when you see the power that that country brings it back, and how they reconnect with it, especially with totems, and also their connection to the lands itself, where they've seen their grandparents and their own families grow up, and then taken from it and then reconnecting. And I think that Bush Heritage should be congratulated in a way that we've set that up in regards to working with custodians of country, and how us as partnership managers really want to foremost get them back to country, just for a visit, until we start working together and how they want to do it. It's really interesting because people look through their lenses as a connection to the country, where boundary fences and other things, you can only go as far as that. But our country doesn't align with with fences and other stuff. Our country is a lot broader, and we've got other custodian groups that connect on the other sides where we've shared country, and so it's a really, really big lens to look through, but obviously the empowerment that it gives mob when they do go back, and obviously having the 13 reserves in Queensland and dealing with every single custodian of that country, and just seeing them, how they feel and how they just want to just get back to country and just enjoy it. And as we always say, we don't own the country, we belong to it. So that's one of the biggest things, and it's really enjoyment, moving forward with that sort of gratitude and respect of listening to. I'm in a pretty good position listening to all the storylines of 13 custodian groups, and and what's so empowering to see the old people back on country.
Beautiful, thank you, Ross. We have examples across our reserves where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people or traditional custodians haven't been able to access their country because it's been locked up in different pastoral hands or different land management arrangements. And through the work that Bush Heritage does with buying land and protecting it forever for conservation, we have the ability to often bring back traditional custodians onto their country that they haven't accessed for about 150 years. So it's a really incredibly important and emotional side of our job that we have the privilege of being able to do, is seeing generations of traditional custodians coming back and connecting with place that they weren't able to connect with before because of colonial access agreements. So that's a really wonderful part among all the other ways that we get to connect with mob through our work that we get to do. Ross, you recently worked with Bidra Rangers at Edgbaston, and I think it was Reserve Manager Sam Jackson who brought 8 rangers out on country to remove old fencing on country and doing meaningful work to protect country there. How do we bring together traditional custodian ecological knowledge and apply that to the modern conservation context when so much land has been degraded and looks so different from when the management was very different, 250 years ago?
Yeah, and that's one of the working with mob to get them back to country, and it's not just about obviously the reserves themselves have got project work. We're trying to involve mob as much as we can, and some of those little projects come up, and it's not only just to do the work; it's actually getting them back to country for healing and moving forward. It's one of those things, I guess, that the more people get back to country, the better that storyline and the connection comes back, and they talk about it. They get back into community, and then the next trip, we might have 15 or 16 there, and then it just keeps building and building, and which is a great outcome. And if we don't combine the two sciences, well, we're not going to get anywhere. As you said before, the desecration of country and and sites and artifacts will move and all that sort of stuff. So it's reconnecting, and joining their storylines and songlines, and it's just just the impact that it does for them in regards to the custodians of that country and how it's changed their views and their lives. And if we don't work together, with the Western science and our science and connect it all together, that's the only way we can change this country for the better. We're not going to get it back to where it is or where it was, but we can certainly make inroads to working together on country and making sure that we do the best. Like obviously different. We were introducing back cultural burning, where the cool burns that. But some of that stuff, it's all the mixed grasses now and all the mixed trees. It makes it very hard to do that. So we used to just call it a cool burn. So some of the country is just about getting them back there to re-practice their cultural instincts and intrinsic society of how they work together and moving forward. I guess so. It's very important to me, and it's very important that we make that connection with the custodians of that country and the right people in the right country. So it's good.
Yeah, so thank you, Ross. Kylie, what does caring for country mean to you and your family and your lens through your lived experience? And what are the benefits? And then can you also yarn on how knowledge is passed down to younger generations, traditional knowledge?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of caring for country, what that means to me personally, it's around fulfilling your cultural responsibilities in how you look after land, waters, plants, animals, important species, sacred places. But it also encompasses how you look after yourself and how you look after each other. Um, for me personally, and my family, I'm a descendant of the stolen generation, and grew up in town. So a lot of, a lot of my culture, was not shared with me, and I felt quite disconnected from my country growing up. And many things about my culture I'm learning as I get older and as I've grown up. I guess a big part of my journey in terms of that was an old lady that I was sitting down with in Timber Creek one day. She was telling me her story, and she was asking me questions about myself, and I kind of shared with her, I don't know a lot about, where I come from, and about my culture. And she took me by the hand and said to me, it's not about what you know, it's about what's in your heart, and it's about what's in your blood. And your ancestors are always with you, and they'll guide you, and you'll understand that one day. And I always, like, when I think about that, always see her face. And it really was a turning point for me in terms of where I go to in terms of moving forward, with my own journey and my own culture, and how I contribute to this world and to this life. And it was really important to me that I, use the opportunities that I've been given throughout my lifetime to ensure that, in the place that I live, and those really strong knowledge holders, and elders around me have the opportunity to pass on their knowledge, and you know people feel supported, and people feel, you know able to move forward with their aspirations, and that we're working together. So it's really, in terms of my personal journey in caring for country, I really see, my responsibility to give the my experiences and my value to that space. And in doing that, I think that the best way for me moving forward to do that is to really learn and contribute in a way that's supporting those really important knowledge holders that we have, and intergenerational knowledge transfers are happening, for them and their communities, and in whatever way that I can contribute to that, I will. um, yeah, so I guess that's kind of what that means to me personally. But yeah, I do really feel like, it is a responsibility within me personally, that I move forward and I continue on that journey in that space. Um, yeah, so
Oh, thanks, sis.
what?
I appreciate you so much. I was on the interview panel when Kylie interviewed to get her role, and I was really excited to see that she'd applied, and very much stoked that she's a part of the team. She's an excellent example of leadership that comes from the heart, and leadership that is based in vulnerability, which is something that I think the world needs more and more of now, more than ever. Living in these fractured times with so many, we're in a poly crisis. It's not just climate change and environmental crisis. We're in a social rights and social justice crisis, and there's so many other things going on. Kylie, we're so lucky to have you. She's just an excellent example of First Nations leadership, a really caring person doing things right way. And she's also a deadly boxer, so don't get on the wrong side of her. She's just got back from a boxing retreat, so I'm glad that you've had a bit of time in the sun time. And I did ask her yesterday, that boxing and retreat don't sound like two words that I've heard together before, but apparently that's R&R for you, Kylie.
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah.
Thanks so much, sis. We talk a lot about healthy country planning, and I guess that's one of the ways that we determine how to care for country, how to make a plan, to put that together. And there's lots of different versions of healthy country plans that come, like monitoring and evaluation planning, or MERI. We have other Indigenous led plans that are written entirely in First Nations dialogues that are separate from healthy country planning. How do all of these different types of healthy country plans, etc., and all of the limbs that come off of those differ from standard conservation planning? I'm happy for whoever wants to chuck their hand up.
Yeah, just a quick one, just in regards to the healthy country planning. I think it gives our custodians a way forward of expressing themselves and expressing country, how how they want to work with it, and just to get back there and see the impacts and how they can and see the changes. So it's a very good tool to have, and obviously it's some want it, some don't, but I think it's really important and moving forward with healthy country planning, because it really tells the story for the next generation coming through. They're not just thinking about or learning it, they're actually receiving it and can move on with it. So they're just grabbing the baton and moving forward, I guess, in regards to what the old people are saying, and some of the knowledge holders and the protection of country and how they work with it. So it's really important. And we're all getting that storyline and the song lines and how they all connect. So it's one of those I'd like to see the healthy country plan on all country right around. So it's got a way of learnings for the next generation coming through. It's very important to also acknowledge that we've probably lost a couple of generations through impacts of colonisation and other impacts, and that's there. And for the younger ones in grade 3s and 4s, and that if we don't start educating them and bringing them through as knowledge holders, well, we're only going to lose another generation. So it's very important to have those healthy country plans and Mary plans and project planning around it all, and how we can all work together and to make them empowered and feeling a part of their cultural identity and how they sit in the society and just moving forward with their cultural knowledge, and having that is very powerful itself. So some of our mould now, I don't like calling it lost. I think it's just not practiced enough. So it's reintroducing the practices that the old people have done and led over the years. I don't like the word lost, because it's just one of those things it's very empowering when you get back out there. You can see the medicine and the plants and how they relate to country and the animals and that connection through it all. So it's very important. And as I said, it's very important that we trying to achieve those healthy country plans for the next generation coming through. They're not only reading it, they're seeing it, they're doing it, and that's our mob our hands on. And what we see, we're learnt by doing things and not reading it. So it's very empowering to have those, I guess.
Thanks, Ross. Yeah, you're 100% right, and some beautiful reflections in there. I have a family member who said to me, the law lives in the land, it sleeps in the land, and people revitalize and bring that dreaming state of culture back alive when we work with country and when we do things right way, that it's always living. It's not gone or lost or not able to be revitalized. It's always there. So definitely love those reflections. Did you want to add anything to that, Kylie? And we've got so many questions coming through the chat, so I'm going to jump into there. But did you want to add?
Yeah, I guess just coming on from what Ross was saying, like it's really important that healthy country planning process. If you're not familiar with it, it's a modification of the open standards for conservation, and it's a way of planning and a framework for planning for land management and conservation. And it's really important that it's led by traditional custodians and really grounded in the cultural values and knowledge systems, as well as the traditional custodians' aspirations for country. And then I guess rather than just focusing primarily on environmental or biodiversity outcomes, it's a planning process that is also acknowledging and integrating the human values as a really integral part of that ecosystem. And so, those planning processes, it's really important that they're participatory. So meaning that like the traditional custodians, as well as, the wider community, have opportunities to be involved in the process. And thinking about those different questions about, what does healthy country really mean to them? What is really important, and what are they wanting to see healthy and keep healthy in the future, and what are those actions that need to happen to see this, and who needs to be involved in that work along the way. So I guess it's really gives us a framework to be able to ensure that we're capturing those aspirations for country, and looking at it in the lens of really being able to work alongside that knowledge system and provide as Bush Heritage the right support and the right approach to working with those partners.
Thanks, Kylie. Thanks, sis. That's, really well explained. And there's incredible examples that you and Brittany and Sarah do up across the north through partnerships with ASRAC and MIMO. And really grateful for the three of you and your leadership up in that space. Ross, I'm going to throw this one to you. This is a question from one of the people online. Thanks for your questions. When you look at the countryside, or when you look at country, what do you see from your particular point of view that non-Indigenous people probably don't see? And what are you looking for when you're looking at country?
So, very interesting question, because when you're out on country, it's sometimes you see things and sometimes you don't. Like, I've walked in certain areas for ages and ages and don't see nothing. All of a sudden I go back out there and I'm guided, and I've shown certain sites, or where you get different feelings about where you're not wanted to be or not supposed to be. So it's getting back there on country. And I think the more time you spend on country, the more you see it as the storylines that go. It's one of those things that's hard to explain, but it's because it's a feeling that you get when you're on country. You can feel the difference in a lot of areas, because obviously being in freshwater Murray, what comes with it, and the women business and the men's business. So I really factor in a lot of things that are from country. So I try and make artifacts that's for country, like our emu callers, and clapsticks that so it relates to our country, and how that we make them noises, and certain animals come out, and you look at it the daytime and the night time, and there's obviously animals in the night, and then in the daytime, what you see and what you don't see, and the relation to them certain animals of our totems, and obviously the other mobs. That's it comes back to country too, where they can see the resemblance in the trees. You see the reflection. It's like the reflection you look at in the water. You can see yourself in the water, and that reflection, you see it on country. So when the sun goes up, you'll see it on a different angle. When the sun goes down, you'll see it on another angle. So it's about the relationship to country, and how that images are related to certain aspects of how you see it. I guess it's pretty hard. As I said, it's pretty hard to explain, but you've got to get back to country to really feel it, and you're connected to it when them things come up. So it's very important, and that's one of the best things that that we can do, is get them all back to country so they can really relate to it and see it and feel it. That's most important. Get your feet on there with no shoes on and walk around on the earth. And as we said, we're connected. We don't own the country; we belong to it. So it's where our law and and everything comes from. So it's very important to. Yeah, it's one of those tricky ones. I think it's one of those things. Every certain people you ask that have a different, outcome and different story to that. But that's the way I see it. As I said, sometimes you see things that you never seen before, then all of a sudden you see it as bright as day. So I always believe that I'm led by my ancestors, by our old people, and that just gives you that more connection to country.
So thank you for that beautiful reflection, Ross. At Bush Heritage, we have a Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leadership team, which at the moment is Ross, Vicky Parsley, based on the East Coast, and myself. And we sit with our senior leadership team and provide a diversity of gender balance and knowledge systems, cultural law, age, and gender equity across what we bring, and we make sure that all of the decisions and leadership at Bush Heritage has Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives that come through the leadership group. And I notice when I'm out on country with Ross and Vicky, whether it's a board meeting or with our senior leadership team, that Ross and Vicky are always tuned in. We'll come out, we'll open the doors of the car, and they're looking and listening and walking off away from where the rest of the group generally are. They're really tuned into this intuitive sixth sense of connecting with country and noticing different things. And Ross is always picking up different artifacts and things, and same with Vicky, that they find straight away. And they've always got their eyes and their ears in and are noticing so much about country, which I think is a really beautiful way of perceiving and interpreting the world that is so special and unique to us. Kylie, do you feel optimistic about bush conservation and preservation into the future? And if you could tie in next to the optimism piece, how we do, consultation with communities and how we do that with like a right way approach at Bush Heritage.
Yeah, I guess the optimism question is an interesting one, because I guess for anyone that works in environment or conservation, it can be a very overwhelming space with a lot of challenges. And you can feel like sometimes those challenges are just like, you know, an overwhelming amount of like, what, as me as one person, what could I do to make a difference? It can be difficult sometimes. When those big things that are happening globally, that you're hearing about, and the effects of climate change are just, they skyrocket, and you feel like, what can we really do about it? I do have days like that where it can be, really overwhelming, all of those challenges that you face. But I guess in terms of optimism, it's just so important that we continue to build resilience in that space, to continue on and to do our work and to work together, and find ways to really, have a strong voice and to continue on that work. And then in terms of, the right way engagement question, with our partners at Bush Heritage, that is like a really important, you know, thing that we have focus on, in terms of our approach to partnerships. And I talked a little bit at the start of like what makes it successful, and that right way approach is really fundamental to that. And it has a lot of different pieces to it. And I guess like any other relationship, that it goes through different cycles, and can change over time. And it's really important, I guess, in terms of that right way approach and the engagement space. We're able to continuously reflect on how the right way to work is, and we're really taking our partners, feedback and advice in that space. But then also thinking about, as time goes on, working with those different partners, and those relationships change, how can we adapt and do better? Because I think at Bush Heritage we do a good job working with our partners, but there's always space for improvement. There's always, ways that we can have bigger impact, and there's always ways that we can make sure that we're, being a good partner, and supporting those healthy country plans, or supporting, in the way that we can with our resources to support those aspirations for, looking after country and keeping country healthy. So I guess in terms of that right way approach, we have, the framework for it, but it's always, opportunity to adapt, always opportunity to find better ways of working. Yeah.
Well said, sis. I think being dynamic and being able to adapt to the aspirations and the desires and the feedback of our partners is something that's of utmost importance in this space. And I'd just like to send a massive shout out to all of the different communities that we have the pleasure and privilege of working alongside at Bush Heritage. We currently have 38 active partnerships with different communities all across Australia. And it's our job to be dynamic and take feedback and always learn and grow in this space as well. There is a question in the chat about the change of perception of cultural burning since the 1980s, and that there's a much bigger adoption and recognition and use of the practices now. The question's about how that change came about. I think for the sake of time, I'll touch on that one lightly. After the 2019-2020 bushfires, the wider community really started to look at Indigenous knowledge systems and cultural burning as a great solution to prevent the fire load from bushfires as a hazard reduction approach and attempt. So despite cultural burning being an extremely old practice across a lot of different communities in Australia, that really gave us leverage to hone in and celebrate First Nation sciences and fire practices there. It gave the media lens on the way that we do burning and celebrating and showing the difference with our fires being very different to prescribed burns. They're low, they're slow. You can walk around in thongs with these sorts of fires. It's not like big, high heat blowtorch fire. So that really supported, unfortunately, a big travesty and a lot of loss, created the Australian community to think about the way that we can do fire and hazard reduction differently. So many good questions. There's questions about how people can be better allies, how they can show up and be respectful and not tokenistic, how we deal with conflicts when there's conflicts around Indigenous data, sovereignty and governance, and questions about how to connect in with the right knowledge holders from areas to recover culture and revitalize cultural practice. I know that there are a bunch of different themes and questions, but for the sake of time, I'll throw to you, Ross, and then to Kylie, and we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I guess very important that it's an educational journey about how we tell the stories and that. And I guess that's, I've always said a lot of people, they listen to respond, they don't listen to learn. So it takes a lot of responsibility on themselves to really understand who we are, where we come from, and what we do and what we're about. And so it's it's an education to go through. People are going to have opinions and assumptions on whatever you're trying to achieve, and through anything, and just going back to what we were talking about before about the cool burns and the other cultural burns. That some people perceive that we're going to burn the whole country. We only burn certain areas at certain times, and it's about bringing bush food back into that area and how we share that food with other custodial groups around us. So there's a big educational tool to move forward with that, and the only way we can do that is listen and learn. That same as what my earlier statement was, that country gives us our law, it gives us understanding, it gives us our connection, it gives us everything that we really need. It gives us our food, the waterways, gives us our waters, and everything that comes from that. So it's I think people got to be more open instead of being skeptical of a lot of things that we say and do. I think they're more open to the conversation we have in regards to an educational role that we try and spread throughout the continent. To saying just listen and learn. Don't listen to respond.
Beautiful advice. Thanks, Bala. And Kylie, if you can touch on those little various points. And for those who need to go, I know we're running over time. This meeting is recorded, so you can watch the last bit, but we'll just be a couple more minutes because all of these concepts and parts of our culture are really important to yarn about. So I'll pass to you, Kylie.
Yeah, I guess they're all very loaded questions, but I kind of think about the optimism around that I was just talking about in terms of the optimism around environmental challenges. That also comes with when you're working and trying to support Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander partners, as well as ourselves as Indigenous staff. There are a lot of challenges that we also face, with the ongoing effects of colonization, the removal and disconnection from country. The list goes on. There's a lot of challenges that we also face. And I guess in terms of just a takeaway message that, building resilience is so important, and having a strong voice, working together, we really need to ensure that as we face those challenges, there's not going to be a one-way fix or a one-way solution, but we have to, endure and develop our resilience together. I guess in terms of, I've forgotten the other questions now.
Sorry, I did brain dump.
Yeah, I guess that's okay. I guess that's a good ending point on that. Yeah.
Nah, beautiful. Thanks, sis. And I think between yourself and Ross's wisdom coming through, all of those different points about partnerships and doing things the right way have echoed in such a profound and beautiful way. Thank you both for leading from the heart, leading with vulnerability, and bringing your full selves to this conversation. It's definitely something that we're aware of in times like NAIDOC Week, and when you're an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person working in the partnership space, there's a lot of extra load on sharing knowledge beyond your role. So I really value and appreciate your time and your generosity, sharing all of this with so many different people. It's much appreciated. There are a myriad of incredible resources online to celebrate NAIDOC Week. SBS and ABC have free films. There's lots of books. There's educational resources. I would recommend, when you're looking for different resources, look for the authorship. Try and find resources that are made by traditional custodians themselves. There are so many of them, whether you're in education, health, conservation, science, any field, there are so many different resources online. You can chat to your local Aboriginal community controlled organisation, to your lands trust, to your Aboriginal board, your community board. Keep learning, keep listening, keep having great conversations, and keep being a great ally for culture. We also, down in South Australia, have a position to fill that is our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships Manager. It's an identified position just for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It's based in the South Australian arid rangelands, and it's a really deadly opportunity to join our wonderful team, work alongside Ross and Kylie and myself and the rest of our epic crew, to lead this work on country and in partnerships. So if you're interested, the link will be in the chat. Like I said, it's an identified role only. We're supporting and uplifting the capability and capacity of our workforce, where we have mob leading for mob in partnership space, and then we have amazing non-Indigenous allies and crew that support our work through our partnerships as well. So it will be in the chat. Please put an application, share it around. A massive thank you to Megan. She's got her camera off, but she is like the organizational queen, and an absolute pleasure to work with. She runs a lot of our events at Bush Heritage, and she is an absolute legend. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Matt, for your work in the background. Thank you, Kylie and Ross, for your generosity yarning today. If you'd like to support the work that Bush Heritage undertakes with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander partnerships and traditional custodians across the nation, please get in touch with us. You can access our details on the website or reach out to us via LinkedIn. We're always happy to have a yarn, so please reach out. A huge happy NAIDOC week to everyone. I hope you dance, shake a leg, eat mud crab or fish, do something incredible, hug your family, celebrate culture, find new resources, revitalise language, use traditional place names, do all of those things. Here's to 50 years of Deadly. Here's to honouring our ancestors, those 2,500 generations of knowledge holders and movers and shakers before us. And here's to the next 50, honouring our young ones and making this place that we've inherited a much better one than the one that we landed in. So thank you all. We'll catch you soon. Kaima Esso with lots of love and thanks.